Dungeon Degenerates Hand of Doom takes place in the dark fantasy realm of the decaying eastern provinces of the Strike. Players take escaped criminal adventurers on unsavory missions through 4 distinct regions, each with their own monsters and encounters. As the players explore the Strike, danger levels rise continuously across the map. Players must complete their mission before the Hand of Doom descends on the board, unleashing evil magic on the land. Dungeon Degenerates is for 1 to 4 players co-op. Players can form parties or split up throughout the game at will. There is no obligation to stick together. Gameplay is 1 to 3 hours based on mission. Dungeon Degenerates has an epic RPG campaign feel in an open world sandbox board game, and you bring your experience and items from previous missions. There are multiple missions and objectives of varying difficulty with multiple ways to approach each mission. Dungeon Degenerates is set in a cohesive and fixed world with multiple distinct regions which feature unique encounters and thematic monsters. Encounters allow multiple interaction choices. You do not have to fight everyone you see. Play features an open experience system allowing for character customization with new skills. You are always in danger. The town is not an artificial safe zone. Combat is dangerous. There are various modes of travel. Players cooperate to choose their route and pace, or split up and fend for themselves. Dungeon Degenerates features streamlined combat with tactical depth. Each player rolls dice only once on their turn, using standard 6-sided dice only. There are over 100 monsters with unique abilities and artwork. So that is the game description for the game Dungeon Degenerates Hand of Doom by designers Sean Aberg and Eric Roddy, and published by publisher Goblinko. So in summing up Dungeon Degenerates, it's kind of hard to really indicate what the object of the game is, as your object in any given game will depend on the mission that you are playing. And the missions are essentially the scenarios that you will find in the game. Now, having said that, each game does use a doom track, if you will, as well as a danger level to act as a timer or a end game. Meaning, if you are playing a particular mission and the doom track is completed or reaches its end, then you have lost the game. Now, I don't know whether that means your character is allowed to proceed or not, but for purposes of playing the game in that mission, you have to stop, and I would ostensibly believe start over. Now, excuse me, one of the reasons I am kind of hesitant to say exactly what the game is, because I believe it was intentionally created so that each game would kind of be a different thing every time you play it, which is why it is called by a lot a open world or sandbox type of adventure. Nonetheless, there is a lot going on when you play Dungeon Degenerates. You basically have your characters, which you will select based on some basic templates. So you do not roll for their stats. They're giving basic stats, and from that point on, those stats can be increased or modified depending on their skills or weapons or other items that they might find during the game. In addition to your characters, you have skill cards which you can use to append to your character to change their different skills that are allowable to them. The game is very keyword driven, so that just about everything in the game will refer you to a keyword which you would look up in the rule book, and that would either tell you more detail on a skill, more detail on a monster, or a monster skill. The game is played on a a map or a map board, which is basically a board which has a very colorful psychedelic map on it. In fact, the first thing you will notice about Dungeon Degenerate is it's very psychedelic and very dark artwork. Again, this is obviously an intentional choice by the artist. A lot of people love the artwork or really like the artwork because it is so colorful. It's like you're on an acid trip as you play the game, which is probably in keeping with the theme, in that in Dungeon Degenerate you are playing a criminal or you are playing some other unsavory character in this basically very unsavory world. So everything is dark, everything is depressing, everything is gloomy in a game of Dungeon Degenerates. You are not heroes. In fact, the villains are actually what would be heroes in other games that can appear up, which are called the law, or if you have a bounty on you that you would have to defeat. That being said, the game does have an ability to carry your character and I guess the items they acquire and the skills they acquire over into other games, creating a sort of campaign system. During the game, you have the ability to choose stances as you fight. You have the ability to rest. You will have encounters. You will gain experience. For example, when you encounter a monster, you will get XP, gold pieces, and usually loot. The game map is divided into regions, with each region having its own types of monsters and its own types of loot or its own type of encounters that you will encounter based on the regions. And basically the map has a color-coded thing of regions on it. The game comes with 3 sets of dice, meaning you get 2 d6 dice of a different color, so you have 3 of those. The entire game is fueled by something called the danger level, which basically the danger level will affect what is taking place in your region, including the monsters you encounter, including how difficult the encounter is when you encounter them. There are towns and settlements in Dungeon Degenerates, as well as features on the map, such as Stinking Blood River, which allows you can pay a fee to travel downriver. There is Toon Lake, which is a lake port where you can travel between these ports at no cost, such as Dusk Falls, Fishmonger Camp, Ghost Gate. There are traits, which are features that are added to the map spaces using counters. So you would add a trait to a space, and these can bring special rules or affect how certain skills are played when you land on those spaces. Now, I talked earlier about keywords that are used in the game. Some of the keywords, for example, will deal with statuses or conditions such as slimed, -1 to your agility, poisoned, -1 to your constitution, -2 to your hit points. You have keywords exalted, suppressed, focused, blinded, invigorated, weakened, fatigued, detained, infected, and stunned. You have traits such as destroyed, explored, fungus, inside, lakeport, law, metaphysical, outside, perilous, riverport, settlement. And again, all characters have attributes of agility, constitution, magic, morale, perception, and strength. So having said that, to give you kind of my summation of what you are doing in Dungeon Degenerates is you are basically navigating a map, sometimes as part of a mission. Other times you could simply just be navigating the map in between missions. And as you navigate the map, you are encountering different monsters or creatures depending on the region you are in. Now, there has been several expansions to Dungeon Degenerates, I believe at least 6 or 8. most of which have added more cards, more character templates or cards for characters, more items, more skills, and more missions, so that you get more scenarios in some of the expansions. So now, having said all that, how would I compare Dungeon Degenerates to Journey to the Overland? I think the first comparison, which we cannot escape, is Dungeon Degenerates is a dark degenerate game, as its name implies. You are not a good character, right? You are a criminal. You are part of the criminal element, and the majority of the monsters or characters that you encounter in the game will also be criminals and criminal elements. In fact, I have not read any of the particular missions in the game, but I am not aware of any missions that you play in the game which is going to somehow redeem your character or redeem the land. That is not an option. So in that sense, it's very different than Journey to the Overland. Journey to the Overland is a game which is basically all about trying to create a noble character who will do noble deeds. It is all about the knight's quest. If you are a fan of Arthurian fiction, or if you know of King Arthur and his knights, Journey to the Overland is very much inspired by the ideal of chivalry and a knight's code and a knight's quest. But basically, the game is designed that you are trying to create a noble character who will do noble deeds. In Journey to the Overland, you will encounter monsters and unsavory characters, but they are the exception in the game. And they are very much, there is a sense in Journey to the Overland that they are very much controlled, that the king of the land keeps a very strict, strong hand and a very stern eye on the activities of, shall you say, criminals or lawless elements or evil in general in the Overland, always watching, always wary that it may begin to grow, right? And so you, as a player in Journey to the Overland, are there to assist the king in that cause. So you kind of have two ideologies, and while it has nothing to do in particular with gameplay, I think it has everything to do with the games. So from that standpoint, if you are the type of person that you want to play dark, degenerate type of games such as Dungeon Degenerates, Kingdom Death, you will not like Journey to the Overland. You're just not going to like it, because you will not be rewarded for any of that in Journey to the Overland. In fact, you will be the game system will actively punish you for acts in games that you would do in games like Dungeon Degenerates or Kingdom Death that you will be rewarded for. So there is a complete different axis, if you will, to the two types of games. Now, with regards to mechanics, while Dungeon Degenerates is quote-unquote a board game, what it has done as a board game is take just about all of the role-playing game elements that you could fit in a board game and kind of dump them into the box. So if you were to take Dungeons and Dragons and take everything in the rule book and put it on a card, and then take all those cards and put them in a bucket and dump them into a box and put a lid on it, and you take the darkest module that Dungeons and Dragons have, whatever their darkest, bleakest module is, and melt it, and then spray it over all your cards in your box, and you put a lid on it, that would be Dungeon Degenerates, right? It is trying to take that aspect of role-playing, such as the stances, your rest, your encounters, your skills, your experience points, even the different characters that you can play or that you would use in the game. And these are all basically snatched right out of the role-playing game community and put here on a box and on a table. So Journey to the Overland also builds itself as a solo tabletop role-playing game, However, the difference between Journey to the Overland and a game like Dungeon Degenerates is Journey to the Overland is not simply a role-playing game that you play on a table, but it's also not simply a board game with role-playing game elements. It is equally each, right? And there's also the tabletop aspect to it in Journey to the Overland. So, for example, right now in Dungeon Degenerates, there's no rules for leading troops, right? Which is one of the tabletop aspects of Journey to the Overland. You don't have troops in Dungeon Degenerates right now. I would also say that while Journey to the Overland does use encounter cards, it does not use them the same way that Dungeon Degenerates uses encounter cards. In Dungeon Degenerates, just about everything is on a card, controlled through a card, brought into the game through a card. In Journey to the Overland, the encounter cards and the other cards in the game are primarily designed to usher you in between what would be the scenarios or your missions. But the other thing about Journey to the Overland is you can play in Journey to the Overland and there is no kind of timer going on, right? There's no doom that is clicking so that you have to do certain things by the end of it. In addition, there is no per set mission. So unlike Dungeon Degenerates, when you open the game and you set it up and then you go grab a mission, Journey to the Overland, you open the game and you start playing. And the missions will either come to you or they may not. You may be very far along with your character before you even get anything that you could call a mission. And if you look at some of my gameplay videos for Journey to the Overland, you can see that. I think I played probably 12 or 13 sessions before I really got a first mission or scenario, which was in the very last episode where we are escorting the king's son and anticipating him and his escort being ambushed. And so we're trying to be there to help him, which we didn't succeed at that. But it didn't end my game. So I would say that I would say with regards to Dungeon Degenerates, you are going to have to manage a whole lot of things that are going on at the same time. And the other thing I will say, and this is from reviewers who have reviewed Dungeon Degenerates, which I have not played, obviously, is that Dungeon Degenerates, from what they say, is very luck-based, right? There is mitigation, but the majority of what takes place in Dungeon Degenerates is controlled by your 2d6 die rolls. So basically you will go from d6 die roll, d6 die rolls, d6 die rolls, d6 die. Everything in the game is going to rise or fall on these die rolls. Whereas in Journey to the Overland, there is not an element of luck involved in playing the game. There are dice rolls, but there's also things there are not dice rolls for. So for example, in Dungeon Degenerates, if you have an encounter, you will have to try to roll, for example, maybe an agility if you want to not have the encounter and put it away. Whereas in Journey to the Overland, if you have an encounter you don't want, you declare you are evading, right? And then you make your evade action. So there's no roll to, quote, evade. You just declare you're evading, and because you're evading, you may take a strike, you may take an attack or something like that. But unless the encounter says you can't escape from this encounter, then that's always a choice to you. So Journey to the Overland is much more. There are much more, I would say, choices and things that you can do that have nothing to do with a luck check. If you want to go to a town or castle and talk to a mayor, you have to roll to see if the mayor will see you. But you can always check to see if you want to talk to the mayor. It's not, you don't have to roll to see if you can see if the mayor will see you. And that might not be a good example. But so in that sense of the game, I believe that the D6 dice, obviously the dice in Dungeon Degenerates, are going to play a much bigger part of your game. Also, I would say, to me, the biggest difference between Dungeon Degenerates and playing a game like Journey to the Overland is you have things such as the danger level, as well as things such as the doom track. And I'm going to talk about them separately. So with regards to the danger level, if the danger level gets to 6 or higher, or if there's a 6 or higher road, something like that, you advance the doom track. And if the doom track, I guess, reaches its end, then the game ends. Now there's various things within the game, I don't have it in front of me right now, that will cause the doom track, as I was saying, to go up. And this is in every game you play. It's just kind of one of the core aspects of Dungeon Degenerates. Now, I'm not sure, it's obviously they could create a scenario and say, in this scenario, don't use the doom track, which I don't know how that would affect the game or not. But it's in the game. The other thing is the danger level, and that is actually a very big part of the game, that as you proceed, this is kind of how the creator decided to scale the game up, is with the danger level. Now, there are things you can do to lower the danger level. I think you can use luck and things like that to bring the danger level down. But when the danger level goes up, it is going to affect everything else you're doing in the game. So conceivably, if you're having a bad game and that danger level is rising a lot, but you're not getting the skills and you're not getting the other things you want, you could get to a point where the game is basically now much higher scale than your character that you're playing to navigate through the game. So again, that is just kind of an observation. It's not anything that I've heard anybody say they've had a problem with the game, because again, I am just talking about from what I have heard about the game. In conclusion, if I had to say, the difference of games that are like Journey to the Overland, what I would say Dungeon Degenerates has that is like Journey to the Overland is you have some open-ended gameplay. It is a solo game. It is a game that uses a card encounter method. It is a game played on a fixed map of a fixed world. And it is a game where you can level up or progress your characters. What I would say is different about Dungeon Degenerates is in Journey to the Overland, you will create your character from scratch. You do not necessarily level your character up. There are skills and things that your character will acquire over time, but simply the ability to level up is not an immediate aspect of the game. In fact, your character will have to do a whole lot before they start to initially level up. However, unlike Dungeon Degenerate, there is no kind of doom track or timer in Journey to the Overland. I would also say, unlike Dungeon Degenerates, where you need a mission to play the game, you need some kind of mission, I would assume, to make sense of why you're kind of walking around and going back and forth over the map. That's not the case in Journey to the Overland. Journey to the Overland, you could just start game one and say, well, I want to travel from Milesteel to Zafton. And that's you just want to go there. You just want to get to that town and see what it's like. So I think that's kind of a difference in the feel and the style and the theme of the two games. It is not an easy game to compare to Journey to the Overland, I would say that. Now, I would say this. If you like Dungeon Degenerates, would you like Journey to the Overland? Probably. I can't say whether if you've ever played Journey to the Overland, whether you like Dungeon Degenerates, because I guess that depends on your taste and how much of a connoisseur of board games you consider yourself to be. I will say, if you did not like Dungeon Degenerates, does that mean you would not like Journey to the Overland? Absolutely not. Because just like many games that share themes, whether it's Gloomhaven, Kingdom Death, Legends of Andor, Dungeon Degenerates, and many other games right now that share these kind of same solo themes and mechanics. The way they are implemented is really will determine the experience you have. And I think in Dungeon Degenerates, the implementation is just 180 degrees different than the way we implement the same types of mechanics in Journey to the Overland. So I hope you can understand that. I hope that kind of makes sense to you. But if not, maybe I'll redo this video sometime in the future. But a lot of people have asked me about it, so I wanted to get it out and do it. Take care, and God bless.